We start now with some theoretical background. And one of the major aspects is, or questions is, well, what is telepathic communication? And most of the people, they have a very good idea what telepathic communication is. Most of the people, they say that is exchange of thoughts, and that is true. And if we define thoughts as, for example, a number or numbers, sequences of words, symbols, or images, even if they are complex, that we could um, relate to thoughts within the telepathic communication. And if you look to that example, we have that two dialogue partners on the left and right, and different aspects of telepathic communication of thoughts. And you see here even mathematic formulas or this kind of things, symbols, are part of that communication. Telepathic communication allows a very complex communication, but there is not just thoughts as a part of telepathic communications. We have a second aspect of telepathic communication, which is extremely important. Most of you who are doing channeling or talking to animals or this kind of things, you might have that experience that we have communication of or exchange of emotions like love or this kind of emotions. And because emotions are very strong supporter and enabler of telepathic communication, we will come back to that aspect a little bit later. But there is also a third aspect of telepathic communication, which is we can exchange sense impressions. So if it's shown here, you can exchange information of basically any sense. And if you talk to animals like a snake, for example, you even can exchange the senses of a snake. Like the sense, if a snake is crawling in the sand, for example, this kind of sense impression you can even perceive. So that is a very interesting thing, because if you talk to animals, for example, you can enter with your consciousness the body, if the animal is allowing that, and can use the senses of the animal, looking around where that animal is walking, for example. That is a very interesting experience. So we have these three areas, and then the question might raise, who can talk telepathically together? And you see here on the left and right side, the head of that woman is changed to light. And that light, this dot, this bright dot, represents consciousness entities. So the telepathic communication is on the level of consciousness entities. And consciousness entity you can imagine as a string vibrating in a low vibration frequency or higher vibration frequency. That's kind of consciousness string. And this indicates that telepathic communication is not related at all to a brain. Even you can communicate with a consciousness group of brain cells. It is not related to a brain. And here are some examples showing that you can even communicate with minerals. You can talk with here, that is a representation of a Keshe free energy component, Maggrav generator here in that case. You can also communicate with devices because of that consciousness entity background. And then we have something very, very important, which we need, and I think you understand that already, but other people just starting to learn telepathic communication need to understand telepathic communication is absolutely independent of space and time. And I will cover that in a second, a little bit more in detail. As a summary, and as I mentioned to you, you all will have at the end of that presentation, of that webinar, the whole slide set available. So you don't need to make many notes on that, what I'm talking about. So we have the exchange of thoughts, of emotions and sense impressions between one or even more consciousness strings or entities independent of space and time. And that leads to something very important. If you run events with scientists, engineers, for example, because all the engineers and scientists, or most of them, not all, they are very much in the paradigm of, I think, matter determines mind. Whether what we need for the future, helping scientists and engineers and other people to understand that is the other way around, that mind determines matter, right? So let's have a look. And that is very important to understand if we talk about telepathic communication and the possibilities of telepathic communication. Matter determines mind paradigm means that most of the scientists, they believe in a kind of Big Bang, right? Which is the reason that our universe exists. But if we now take into consideration the spiritual aspects or even religious belief system aspects, independent of a certain belief system, we reach the new paradigm we are moving into, mind determines matter. And here, there is a very interesting conversational statement of an ET being, which is from the civilization Bentu, close to the Betelgeuse star system in Orion star constellation. When I asked Sigilda, that is the name of that being, whether they would know something like God or the source or the light or similar thing, she answered yes. And the name we have is Besbo. That was the name, and that was a very moving statement because it was full of love when she explained that. And then I asked, what is the translation of Besbo? And she answered, that is the light that outshines everything. So we have many other conversations where other civilizations talk about the source or God or similar thing, but from a different perspective. And that very much touches the point, mind determines matter, which is very important to understand telepathic communication. And I know that some of you, possibly all of you, have read this Message to Mankind, which was published last year, which is available on firstcontact.world, where they told us that we will learn something about the impact of mind over matter. And that is something very important for scientists and engineers when we in the telepathy center talk about communication with extraterrestrial civilizations. And there's another statement here, seen on the left side in English. They are talking about a spark within us, and that spark is the same across all ET beings, all beings. There is no exception, and that is the reason they call themselves brothers and sisters of the One, and we might call the One the Source or God or whatever. So basically, independent of the location of a civilization in the cosmos, we are all looking to the One. And that leads to something very, very important to understand why we can communicate with, even with objects, using telepathic communication. And this is related to questions we may ask, whether the creator or the source or the light is able to think, and whether the creator or the source is able to feel. And I can tell you, even spiritual people struggling sometimes with this kind of questions and their answers. Well, it is very important to understand this, and therefore I will take 2-3 minutes to explain. Because the creator or the source or the light or God, whatever you have a name for it, he can think, or it can think and feel. And this is then leading to consciousness. And that is the reason sometimes we hear the expression, the I am presence. And that is related to the existence of the source or the light, which is a change of a state, if you like, a state of it may be, to a state which is it is and I am. So from it may be to it is and I am, that is basically the moment the source exists. And it is, the state of it is basically the love we know. And the I am is the consciousness of love. So that is basically this slide in a very, very rough description. Now, you see at the first view a very complex image, but it is not such complex as it might appear. This is a model we use to explain the participants of telepathy center events, even scientists and engineers, how we can understand telepathic communication. That is not, please, I would like to emphasize, the explanation of the creation. It is a model we can work with. And I really recommend to talk to your spiritual guides because you will step by step perceive or receive new information regarding an expanded model. But this model helps to understand what is going on and why we can talk to every single aspect of the creation. So what does this image show? That is the source, the light, which starts to unfold itself in different levels, like a tree, if you like, basically through a multidimensional flower of life. That is the background of that. And at a certain level, we have this object here, let's say object to that. We can describe it as the higher self. And the higher self is like an apple tree. We can imagine an apple tree. And this apple tree has apples like this apple here. And this apple, for example, could have the name Alfred. Not Alfred Steinecker. It has the name Alfred. And the apple has many apple seeds, right? Indicated by the blue and red dots. And the important thing is, at this level, every single aspect of that apple tree has 100% consciousness. And then at a certain stage, this apple decides to make experiences and sends apple seeds somewhere into the creation. And this seeds can have experiences on different dimensional levels. And here are 3 levels shown in the 3D space here, which is that layer at the bottom, as an example on Earth. So you see we have here one red seed indicating one incarnation here as a baby, as a little female baby. And then we grow up and then we die and go back. And then we have one seed on Earth as a plant or as a sabre tiger here, for example, or we have one seed making experiences in 3D in the future from our perspective. Actually, we have no time. That is just an illusion, if you will. So basically, those seeds make experiences now. From this perspective here, we have these experiences now, basically at the same time, if you like. And that is very important to understand, because the source or the light or God, whatever, creates his creation based on thought forms, based on the emotion of love. All aspects of creation are thought forms, vibrating in different frequencies, right? Because even 3D has its own vibration. Even it's a low vibration, it's a thought form. And because of that, we can communicate telepathically, because that is part of every single consciousness aspect across time and space. And if you can see here, in that green box, even it's possible to communicate with incarnations in the past. Even if you are a plant in the past, you can communicate now with your incarnation in the past, or even with a possible incarnation in future. That is very important to understand. But because every single aspect of the creator has consciousness, even a single molecule or atom has a consciousness and you can communicate with. And that is the beauty of telepathic communication, because you can communicate with everything in the creation. And just to mention this, one of the seeds could incarnate even in a higher dimension on a different star system or planet, for example. Yeah. This background that the creation is based on thought forms gives us many huge opportunities if we start to learn telepathic communication and communicate with aspects of the creation. If we look to this, it is even possible to change by our thoughts, our telepathic communication based on open heart and love, objects in the past, for example, if you like. So if you, for example, communicate telepathically with one incarnation in the past, many hundreds or thousands years ago, and you look through the eyes of your incarnation, you would be able to change or alter the reality of this incarnation. You can, that was one person experience, you can change one animal into another animal, which is for that incarnation a wonder, a miracle, right? But that is just telepathic communication. And it is something I would really like to mention that should be on taking responsibility for that, what you are doing together with your guide, with your spiritual guide. Talk with them whether you can do this kind of things, and based on love. That is something you should always consider when doing telepathic communication. But it's possible to change and alter realities by using telepathic communication, right? So, as I mentioned before in one slide, we also can talk with free energy devices. And here, basically, this bottom layer shows telepathic communication helps to be in harmony with all aspects of the creation. But let's go back to the free energy aspect. Free energy devices, components are very important for the future of mankind. And that's the reason telepathy centers also support engineers and people developing and using free energy devices, because it's very important that we synchronize our mind, our consciousness, our heart with the free energy devices. And therefore, we support building events, engineering events, building Keshe, Magrav, Q generators, and this kind of things, communicating, for example, with plasma beings related to Q6 or whatever. And what we are also doing, That is something I would like to ask you in a second. What we're also doing, we learn to communicate with single molecules or single atoms even.